From Oshkosh Community Media Services, this is Oshkosh City Cable 10 and broadcast on 101.9 FM WOCT Oshkosh. Welcome to Your City at Work, your program about local government departments and services. Your City at Work is a production of the City of Oshkosh and Oshkosh Community Media Services.
Hello everyone, and thank you for joining us on Your City at Work. I'm your host, Emily Makowski, joined by our Principal Planner for the City of Oshkosh, David Buck, who is going to be focusing on a big project that we actually had him and Darren Burek in a few months ago, actually, when this project was getting started. Went into effect last month, and we're going to learn a little bit more about it, delve into the details a little bit, and hear how it's going. So thanks for joining us today, David.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
So first of all, for people like me who don't really know anything about the design standards, what exactly are they and who do they apply to?
Sure. Well, there's two independent sections of the zoning code now that deal with the design standards for residential single and two-family homes. The first one is what everybody refers to as an overall design standard that applies to all single and two families. They're relatively simple but pretty well defined. And then there's a second section that's a traditional neighborhood design overlay. That is a model code that would go on to select areas, much more detailed, contain specific model design standards, and that can be applied either as a traditional neighborhood overlay as written or amended to be a plan development to kind of fit the needs of the neighborhood and the the character and design of the neighborhood. So there's two different standards, both incorporated right into our municipal code.
Okay, and so, I mean, really, what are the objectives of the more universal design standards that really apply to everyone?
Sure. Again, those kind of are single and two-family homes is what these address. The purpose is really kind of twofold. One is to maintain basic architectural quality of residences, I should say, within the community, and to kind of minimize adverse impacts that happen not just to the house itself that's being rehabbed or being worked on, but also the effects that could have on surrounding homes, the general neighborhood, and then taken in a larger scale to the community as a whole. Mm-hmm. So really the goal is to stabilize neighborhoods and make sure that rehabs and improvements are compatible and not detrimental.
And I mean, over the years, people make a lot of changes to their houses, and this is kind of aimed to create or to keep things from going a little bit downhill, right?
It is. In the process, we heard a lot of comments, death by a thousand cuts, mm-hmm. That got kind of transferred into destruction of a house by the removal of an individual window. Over time, becomes one window, two windows, three windows, until there's no windows left at all in the house. So yeah, over time those things can cause an incredible negative impact on the community. So this is really a way to try to direct homeowners and property owners to do an appropriate thing for the long term rather than long-term picture rather than just short term.
Right. And now these new standards went into effect about a month and a half ago on March 1st, I think it was, and it's been kind of a long process. Starting from the planning all the way to now where they're in effect. Where did the planning begin and where did the ideas come from?
Sure. Well, the planning began in the spring of 2012. The Common Council basically directed staff and the city manager to come up with some type of residential design standard, to stop some of the poor construction practices that we have been seeing kind of increasing in numbers. So at that point, the city contracted with a group out of Chicago, a urban design firm called the Lakota Group. And throughout 2012, they came to the community, drove around, took pictures, met with stakeholders, met with neighbors, homeowners, and they developed sort of a concept direction to go with design standards. We held a workshop at the end of 2012 with not only the Common Council, but the Plan Commission, the Landmarks Commission, which is our Historic Preservation Commission, Sustainability Advisory Board. They reviewed those concepts and kind of said, yes, okay, this is the direction we want to go forward with. So that's really how it all started and how it all began in 2012.
Okay, all the way back in 2012.
All the way back in 2012.
Okay, so then, I mean, what was the next step? It really was drafting these standards. So was there any kind of, did you look at what other cities are doing as well,
Sure.
as far as that goes?
Definitely. We looked at cities throughout the country, but we primarily focused on cities within the state and cities of comparable size. A lot of times you'll have very small cities that have, or small towns that have very strict standards. And so we compared that, but basically after that first workshop that we had, joint workshop, a design standard review group was put together, and that had neighborhood residents, it had developers, community developers, private developers I should say, realtors, home builders, and they met throughout 2013 and kind of refined these standards into what we came up with was the universal and then the overlay code. And then at the end of 2013 we had another joint workshop to present what came out of all those groups. We received feedback from that. We had an open house in January of this year to present it to the public. It was very well attended. We got very positive feedback and some comments from that. Then we took those through the Plan Commission and Common Council for review and adoption in February, and it was adopted in March.
All right, and here we are today.
And here we are today.
And I know we've got a few pictures actually to kind of show us what we're looking at, to kind of compare and show the way that we were saying how different things affect the way the house looks or the way
Sure.
the home looks over the years. So a few before and after pictures, if you kind of want to explain to us what exactly
Sure.
we're trying to prevent here with these standards.
Well, in this picture, you'll see obviously two drastically different looking houses, but believe me, they are the same house. What you can see with this house is over time the porch had been removed, some of the windows had been closed, and the doorway had been closed off on the front of the house. And it's those, as you mentioned before, it's those incremental changes to a house like this. If you're the neighbor to this house or you're down the block, your property value is probably going to be affected by what has happened to this house over time. Your ability to sell the house and regain some of your investment, usually the biggest investment anybody makes is their house, can be negatively affected. And then sort of selfishly in the city standpoint, over time, this is going to affect property values, which of course affects taxes and brings down the whole city as a whole.
Yes.
This is another one as well that is less of a visual impact, but you can see the front porch has been closed off. There are still some windows on there, but they've been closed off. And some select windows on that front facade have been completely closed. The porch has been changed from sort of a traditional, or stoop I should say, and steps, from a traditional setting to sort of a prefab that you just kind of add on. So this doesn't have as drastic of an impact as the previous, but you can see over time that the changes in window sizes, in window placement, the blank wall areas, the enclosures of porches really start to detract from how that house originally looked.
Just looks a little off to me, you know? What are some of the, what are the reasons behind the changes that people make? Is it a cost issue?
Sometimes it's a cost issue. Oftentimes it is an education issue. They're not exactly sure exactly what is appropriate for the house. A builder will come in and give them a price quote. Cheapest is usually what you want to go with. And they may not just know the difference. That is, education we find is the biggest element, and you don't see these changes immediately, but over time you can start seeing the difference. So also sometimes they want to close off porches to make living space. A lot of times in a rental unit they'll want to get more bedrooms, so you'll see a lot of closures that way. Bathroom remodels will have windows close off.
Right, and like you said, it's small changes coming in an incremental period, so it's not, those before and after pictures, it's not an immediate thing where it goes from this, beautiful historic house to the more updated version with the closed off windows and everything. So
Right.
it is sometimes hard to notice, I would think, over the years.
It is. One thing we found with more increasing in the city is a drastic change immediate. So they'll do all the changes immediate. And I'm not sure if that is a sort of a conception of immediate change over long-term health of the property, kind of getting away from that long-term view and more of a short-term gain, which as a planner, we're always looking out for the long term.
Exactly.
So,
and we've got an example here of changes done right.
Right. This is a
correct
house
way.
of before and after. You can see changes to the house. Actually, the after has corrected some of the things that have happened in the past. The railings on the steps, they now have railings on both sides. But what's really important with this one, the after shot is all modern materials. It's vinyl siding.
Really?
It's new windows. It's new window casings, new porch and steps. But if you're going down the street and driving down the street, you wouldn't know that that house is modern. So this is, a great example of a rehab that can be done appropriately.
It's beautiful.
And this builder just kind of knew what to do. And the homeowner also, I'm sure, wanted to keep that character as well.
And it really kind of retained its historical appeal. I mean, there's so much great history here in Oshkosh, and the older buildings and houses are just, I think it really adds a lot to the neighborhoods, and like you were saying, financially it helps a lot with the neighborhoods.
They definitely do, and one thing that Oshkosh has that a lot of communities, newer communities, don't have is that great housing stock that is typically pre-50s housing stock. They don't build houses after World War II. They didn't quite build them the same as they did before. Materials weren't as good, weren't as available. The skilled craftsmen weren't necessarily there anymore to keep constructing, and now a lot of times it's a cookie cutter houses, so they're all the same. So we have a great advantage in this community and a great opportunity to promote our traditional neighborhoods, and this is a way to protect that.
Yes, and the design standards are in effect right now. How have they been going so far? I realize you don't need to make any changes until you apply for a permit, correct?
Correct, yeah. These aren't retroactive or anything like that. It's when you come in to do a change or do an addition that the standards would come into effect. So far it's been real good. A lot of it has been an educational component, telling a homeowner what the standards are and why they exist. Usually once they understand that, it's like, okay, yeah, it makes sense. In some cases, it's a homeowner that doesn't really understand construction methods, and so they get educated that way by staff. But a lot of it's been that. We've had one variance request to close off windows. That'll be coming this month to the Plan Commission, who have the ability to appeal these standards, to grant variances to the standards. And this one, staff is recommending approval on this. It's a closure of 2 windows on the side of a house, and they're not visible from the street. So there's really no negative impact to the neighborhood, so we are comfortable with approving those changes.
Excellent. And all these the design standards are available online. So if people are looking to see the more universal residential design standards, they can go to the website under the municipal code, correct?
Correct. It's in the zoning ordinance, and it's section 3035M in the zoning code. You can always contact our office or email us, and we can send you out one as well if you're not savvy with going onto the internet.
Excellent. Well, we're about halfway through the program here, so we're going to take a quick break here on Your City at Work. In the meantime, check out the latest In Your Shoes segment. I was able to step into the shoes of one of our facility maintenance workers here at the City of Oshkosh, and let me tell you, it was not the easiest thing I've ever done. Take a look. We'll be right back on Your City at Work. Hello and welcome to another segment of In Your Shoes, a chance for us to go ahead and step into the shoes of a city employee and see what their day consists of. Today we're stepping into the shoes of our facility maintenance employees, so let's go ahead and get started on our first task. Terry gave me a little lesson on installing some drywall. The practice ones weren't so bad, but once we got to the big piece, I started to have a little bit of trouble. Luckily, Kurt was quick to step in and help me out. Kurt and Terry told me that about 50% of their job consists of projects like this one. And at one time, there are a number of projects going on, ranging from drywall, office expansion, and other remodeling. Then it was over to the Grand Opera House to help Judy replace some air filters up in the attic. This was one of the easier filters to change. Other ones have to be changed from the roof, outside. While putting them back in, we taped them together so it would be easier to remove them when it came time. Air filters at the Grand need to be changed twice a year. Then I treaded outside to try my hand on the snowblower.
Open that door. Now, you always want your strobe light and your rear lights, and you'll put your foot there and turn this key to start it.
The facilities maintenance crew is responsible for clearing snow from all the walkways at City Hall and the police department, including the surrounding public sidewalks. That was pretty easy, but I still took it nice and slow. After that, we came back inside to take care of some of the daily tasks, like vacuuming. I got to use the nifty backpack vac. Facilities maintenance employees vacuum the stairwells at least 3 times a week. They also use the backpack vac for other tiled areas in City Hall. Since it was a snowy day, the floors inside were wet and dirty, so out came the floor scrubber. It felt like I was driving a mini Zamboni. The floors are cleaned 1 to 2 times per week at the police department. City Hall isn't so lucky to have a floor scrubber. A good old-fashioned mop and bucket is used there. Finally, we ended up right back where we started to finish the drywall job. We started out with the paintbrush for the corners and edges. And then got the bigger areas with the roller. The drywall needed 2 coats of paint on top of primer. That's going to conclude this segment of In Your Shoes. Thanks again for joining us. I've learned a lot today that facilities maintenance employees do so much more than what we see them doing on a daily basis, and I can definitely say I have a whole new appreciation for our facility maintenance crew. If there's a city department or employee that you'd like to learn more about on In Your Shoes, you can email me at emakowski@ci.oshkosh.wi.us. Thanks again for joining us on In Your Shoes, and we'll see you next time. Welcome back to Your City at Work. Again, my name is Emily Makowski, joined by our principal planner here at the City of Oshkosh, David Buck. Thanks again for joining us today, David.
Sure.
So now it's time to talk about, we're going to delve a little bit deeper into the design standards here, to the traditional neighborhood design overlay. Now these are a little bit more specific to neighborhoods.
They're really tailored to the design of the neighborhood character for which they will be adopted on. Mm-hmm. So yeah, they're not general, they're not broad, they're much more specific. So these, I mean, what we talked about in the first half of the program here, those apply to everyone. You don't need to create your own specific plan. They're pretty general. These ones, neighborhoods are actually able to create themselves, right? Correct, yeah. What's in the zoning ordinance is really a model design standard code. Mm-hmm. It's based on homes that are pre-50, what we call traditional home types, when they were certain styles. They were Queen Anne's, they were bungalows, they were 4 squares. So they're tailored for that type of housing unit. Certain shared features are porches. Almost every home from that period would have a front porch. Modern homes don't have that. So the model code was really designed for those types of traditional neighborhoods, pre-50 neighborhoods. But the model code can also be tailored for any neighborhood. So it could be a 70s ranch neighborhood or a modern neighborhood. Because they're adopted individually on an area-by-area basis, they can be tailored to meet the needs of that exclusive neighborhood. Okay, and there are, we've just pulled up a slide here, there are some more areas that have a little bit more potential for the application of these standards, right? Certainly, and some of the things on this slide, it's kind of hard to see. As I had mentioned, they're really designed for traditional neighborhoods of pre-50, and the map on the right, it's very difficult to see, but the sort of colored portion of the maps are homes that were built in Oshkosh prior to 1950. Mm-hmm. So those areas would be more appropriate to the model ordinance itself. It kind of gives you an idea that a lot of Oshkosh, a good majority of Oshkosh, was built prior to 1950. Yeah, it's surprising looking at the map how many there are. It is. There are very many.
And you were explaining to me before the show too, that smaller picture, it's more of a full block facade that you're looking at, correct?
Correct. It's an overlay code, but really one of the goals of the code is of the overlay is to preserve the character of the neighborhood. So the minimum size for one of these overlays would be from block face, both sides of the block of the street, from intersecting street to intersecting street. That way you're protecting the entire curb appeal in the entire street.
Right, so it's not more of if two people from a block are saying that they want to adopt these standards, it really takes that whole block for them to be able to do that.
It would take the whole block, yeah. And again, the model code isn't designed for modern structures. It is designed for those traditionals. We would have to do a hybrid for a more modern block.
Okay, let's talk a little bit more about the standards themselves. What are some examples of things that might apply to these standards?
Sure. Well, existing windows and door patterns are very important. As I had mentioned, porches are a very classic and very defining feature of a traditional home, and those are one things we're encouraging the original porches and stoops to be maintained. If they need to be replaced or new ones added, that they would be compatible to the original design of the home. It also addresses additions and changes, so if you're adding onto the house, it needs to be appropriate to scale, size, building materials, placement on the lot. Also, the fenestration or the openings on an addition. You don't want an addition that has no windows or doors on it. That's not a typical character of really any home. And then also it addresses infill construction. So new construction would not have to duplicate a traditional home, but it have to be sensitive to that style. So if you're in a neighborhood of single-story houses, don't come in and put in a 3-story home. Maybe a 2-story or a story and a half, so it is complementary to the neighborhood and doesn't detract from it. And it gets much more detail with materials. The overlay does allow all modern materials to be used, but that they have to be sympathetic to what the originals were.
Right.
Things like casings around windows are something you're always going to see on a traditional home. Modern windows don't need those casings. So a lot of times they'll pull them off, the casings and the trim around windows and doors. And like you had said before, when you look at that house, you're like, well, there's windows there, but something doesn't look right. And when you compare the two with the casings and the trim, you can start seeing why something is off, and that's usually what it is.
Right, and so by using those modern materials, you're still able to get the casing, the look of the older, more historic house that way. You
can, definitely. And the modern materials, plastic materials, there's wood composite products, metal and vinyl. So there's a lot of new materials. A lot of people like the new materials. Some feel, and there's dispute on this, but some feel that they're more energy efficient, or they're easier to work with. On the other side, there's a lot of people that say no, the windows that were put in 100 years ago are still functional. They were designed to last 100 years, where modern ones are designed to last much shorter time frames. But it would allow you to use modern materials and modern construction methods. I mean, we're not trying to hinder your ability to improve your house. We're really trying to guide you to do appropriate rehab and not detract.
Yes, definitely. And I mean, have any neighborhoods adopted these yet, or are these kind of still in the works a little bit?
They're still in the works. They are very young. We've had several neighborhoods who have been poking around and looking at doing something like that. As you know, just recently, the Middle Village neighborhood adopted their first neighborhood plan. Part of that plan does have a goal of protecting the character of their homes. They have been thinking about doing an overlay. We've been approached by other residents individually and in groups, but nobody has yet started the formal process of designing an overlay for their area.
Okay, so how exactly does the planning process for a neighborhood to be able to do that go? Where does it begin and how does it start?
Sure, it begins with contact to the planning department, obviously. You'd come into us either as an individual, but more likely as a neighborhood association. You'd contact us. We would basically start the process of doing sort of a inventory or a study of the neighborhood you live in and the area you think the design standards should apply. We would check that against the model to see which ones really apply and which ones don't. And then also start multiple neighborhood meetings and a lot of public meetings to sort of gauge the desirability of the standards for all the residents in the neighborhood. One thing, we wouldn't want to impose anything on a neighborhood that doesn't necessarily wanted itself. Really, this overlay is a empowerment tool for a neighborhood to adopt standards that they feel are necessary and desirable to protect their equity. I oftentimes say it's ironic that new subdivisions often have private covenants on what you can do to your house, sometimes to such detail that you can only use certain housing designs. But older areas and traditional neighborhoods were never designed that way, and they don't have those same protections. So this is a way to kind of get some protections in a subdivision that happened, 150 years ago potentially.
Yes, and there's always changes to be made too. Like you said, for those new neighborhoods, obviously they're going to put these different plans into place, but for the older neighborhoods, they never really got that chance. So now is the chance to kind of get that going.
Right, and using the sort of extensive diagrams and explanations that are in the model code, it can let a homeowner realize what parts of their home and their neighborhood actually make it traditional and give it its character. Because if you're not a design professional or an architect or a builder, a lot of times you don't quite understand that. And as we had said before, it can be death by 1,000 cuts, and you never realize what's happening until it's done, until it's happened.
Right, exactly.
So this is an education tool for them as well.
Yes, and again, there's a lot of other education materials, both online but just by contacting the planning department.
Definitely, yep. That's what we're here for.
And we got a few minutes left, and I know we wanted to talk a little bit about how both of these standards really want to promote neighborhood beautification and revitalization. So can you just tell us a little bit about that and the efforts for that right now?
Sure, yeah, those topics have been extremely important to the city in almost all of our comprehensive plans, surveys, planning documents going back for a lot of years, 20, 30 years. As far as input we've received and comments from citizens and stakeholders, urban design has been a big factor for Oshkosh. And so now we're just kind of getting to that. There's kind of been a feeling, I think, that the allowing carte blanche alterations to homes has ended up resulting in really inappropriate and detrimental changes to our neighborhoods. And so that's kind of where these standards kind of are coming from. There was sort of a determination to go with the standards because the universal standards are really very minimal and simple to understand set. The overlay, which would have a lot more public education, are much more detailed, and as I had said, are really an empowerment tool. But I think another thing I wanted to touch on quick is that these standards also will act as an encouragement for economic development in the city as a whole. The quality and integrity of our housing stock and our neighborhoods is a big draw factor to employers who oftentimes need to have their employees want to live in the community where they're locating. So to think that the health of a neighborhood and the health of economic development or commercial area are disconnected is not true. They are really, really connected together. And we've done a lot of design standards in our commercial corridors, in our downtown, on the highway, in our business parks, but we have not kept up in our residential side. And I think residents and also employers and business owners are realizing that. So we're kind of catching up now.
Yes, and just how all those things are so interrelated. It's very important to remember that and make sure that they're all caught up here on the same level.
Definitely, yeah.
We are completely out of time, so thanks so much again for joining us today,
Sure.
David. Again, if you'd like to find out more information, you can go to the city's website at www.ci.oshkosh.wi.us. Go to the planning department's page or go to the municipal code, or you can call the planning department at 236-5059. Make sure you tune in to City Cable 10 for all of your government programming, and check us out at oshkoshcommunitymedia.org for replays of your favorite shows. You can also go to our YouTube, Twitter, Pinterest, or Facebook for other programming and city updates. Finally, if you're a Pinterest fan also, you can check out our board for the latest snapshots of the city and different events going on. Thanks again for joining us on Your City at Work, and we'll see you next time.